Many people believe that Adolf Hitler was the originator of Nazi ideology. However, this is only true to an extent. Many elements that emerged into what became Hitler's political thought had been circulating around Germany and England for some time. In today's video, we'll tell you about Hitler's mentor, Dietrich Eckart, whose ideology and ideas were the starting ground for one of the darkest periods in the history of Germany and the rest of the world. Dietrich Eckart was born in 1868, 3 years before the many states of Germany united under the Prussian crown. Eckart was born in the large and influential Kingdom of Bavaria, which became the largest state in Germany in 1871. The unification of Germany was the culmination of the hope that many Germans had had for decades, that the many German-speaking peoples outside the Austrian Empire would unite and take their rightful place as one of the most powerful nations in Europe. But before we tell you more about Eckart, we've got to tell you a bit more about the unique times he lived in, before he met Adolf Hitler. The 1800s were also when many changes were taking place in what was to become Germany. The Industrial Revolution began in England in the 1700s and came to the Germans in the 19th century. By the time Eckart was born and Germany was united, it had caused profound changes in German society. Some of these changes were welcome. Germany became more powerful, and generally speaking, its people also enjoyed a rise in income, especially in the country's growing cities. From about 1850 onwards, the cities of Germany, especially in the west and southeast, grew by leaps and bounds. Cities became wealthier, more cosmopolitan, and had greater influence. But unfortunately, they also grew much dirtier. The skies and rivers grew increasingly polluted, the streets became much more crowded, and while Germany was one of the first countries on Earth with universal healthcare, disease rates and poor health grew. Technology and opportunity meant that many people who previously worked in agriculture or small towns were forced to move to the city out of necessity. For centuries, most Germans did not travel more than 20 miles or so from their homes for their entire lives. Even after railroads began to be laid throughout the country, transportation for most people was slow or expensive. Farmers and shopkeepers could not afford to take days off to travel to the city. Even today, the many regions of Germany have their own dialects and accents because, for centuries, most people never left their own region. With much of the population moving to the city, people from Bavaria, for example, were interacting with people from other areas of the country regularly for the first time. For many people, this was strange. But since many of these strangers were German too, most people adapted. However, the opportunities springing up in German cities, especially those in the east, like Berlin, meant that immigrants from other countries began coming too. In Eastern Germany especially, this meant Poles, Czechs, Russians, Hungarians, and other people began to move into the German cities. German society and culture as a whole was not awfully different from the other cultures of Western European nations like Belgium, Holland, and France. Still, in many ways, it was quite different from that of people from the East. As you likely know, groups of people moving into the close quarters of a city can sometimes lead to problems. Germany was no different. Then there were the Jews of Germany and new Jewish arrivals from Eastern Europe. Generally, Germany was less anti-Semitic than its neighbors, at least those to the east of it. That's not to say that anti-Jewish prejudice was not a regular feature of everyday life in Germany, especially in the cities. Still, compared to Poland, Russia, Romania, etc., life in Germany for its Jewish citizens and residents was better. Still, though life was better in Germany for most Jews, anti-Semitism was a daily fact of life. The reasons for anti-Jewish prejudice are rooted in misunderstanding, rumor, and the unfortunate habit of human beings of handing down their hatred from one generation to the next. Romanticism was one of the movements that took hold in Germany in the 1800s. On its own, the Romantic movement was a call for people to return to and value nature, restore their humanity and human emotions in the face of industrialization, and embrace community. Unfortunately, a significant minority of Germans took this a bit too far. This was called the Folkish movement. Folk is the German word for, you guessed it, folk, or people. For those who believed in the ideas of the Folkish movement, the folk were Germans who valued culture, not foreigners or Jews who could not truly understand and appreciate German culture and German history. As the power of Germany grew in the late 1800s, another element was added, one which had been held by the minority for many years, but began to be more widely embraced as Germany advanced: German ethnic superiority. Dietrich Eckart was one of the people who embraced a type of German Romanticism which was heavily influenced by Völkisch ideology. By the time World War I ended, Eckart had become a famous man in Germany. In the early 1900s, he wrote a variation on Henrik Ibsen's famous play Peer Gynt, which made the hero into a model of the folkish ideal, a sort of German Superman struggling against the Jews, who in the play take the form of trolls. The play ran hundreds of times and made Eckart a rich and a famous man. In December 1918, 1 month after Germany's defeat in World War I, Eckart founded a folkish weekly newspaper called In Plain German. The paper was backed financially by wealthy members of a new folkish group called the Thule Society. One of its members and Eckart's partner was Alfred Rosenberg, who later became regarded as one of the foremost theorists of Nazi ideology. Like many other right-wing and moderate Germans, Eckart believed that Germany's loss in World War I was not the result of losses on the battlefield, but of being stabbed in the back by socialists and Jews at home. A month after founding his paper, Eckart and 3 others founded the DAP, for Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, or German Workers' Party. Eckart's paper then became known as the Völkischer Beobachter, or Folkish Observer, which became infamous for its lurid accounts of rumored and untrue Jewish crimes against Germans, particularly blonde-haired, blue-eyed German women. Soon after this, Eckart met Adolf Hitler, who was initially sent by the army to report on the DAP, and quickly realized that the party was the embodiment of ideas he had been forming for some time. Hitler came to Eckart's notice after he gave a speech to the small membership of the DAP sometime in the winter of 1919. Of course, not everyone who saw Hitler speak was enthralled by his energy, manner, and strong beliefs, but many were, including Eckart, who believed that he had just seen the future leader of the DAP. Hitler was unpolished in speaking both in front of an audience and individuals. Eckart is the man credited by Hitler himself as his mentor. Later, Hitler commented that regarding his speaking methods, "I was still an infant," before Eckart taught him the fundamentals of public speaking, good manners, proper German, and the importance of appearance. Hitler and Eckart shared a hatred of the Jews and had notions of removing them from German life, either by deportation or, as Eckart put it, putting them on a train and driving it into the Red Sea. Both believed that for the German people to achieve what they thought was a great destiny, a war between the Jews, who they believed were the opposite of Germans in every way, had to be defeated, in other words, annihilated. Eckart was instrumental in helping Hitler gain support and contacts in Munich's upper and military classes. This helped the party financially and through word of mouth with influential people. By 1920, Hitler had become a power in the DAP, though not yet the Führer. That would come the next year. In 1920, Hitler and Eckart pushed through changes in the party platform to make it a bit less socialist and more national. With these changes came a name change. The DAP became the NSDAP, the German acronym for National Socialist German Workers' Party. The word national in German is spelt the same as it is in English, but is pronounced national. From this, we get the word Nazi. At the same time, Eckart created what was to become the famous Nazi slogan, Deutschland erwache, or Germany awake, that was to be used in Nazi propaganda. By 1922, Hitler had won a power struggle within the party and became the Führer. As Hitler grew in power and influence, Eckart's influences on him waned. Hitler replaced him as editor of the Völkischer Beobachter and took umbrage with Eckart's disapproval of his plan to stage a coup in Munich with the aim of eventually taking over Germany. Though he and Hitler remained friendly, and Hitler at least publicly always praised Eckart, their relationship became one in which the student had surpassed the teacher. Eckart even believed that Hitler had begun to show signs of megalomania and began to see himself as a German Jesus. Eckart had been forced to run from the law when he published a defamatory article about Germany's president and fled to the mountains of Bavaria, to a place called Berchtesgaden, which Hitler fell in love with. Nevertheless, despite his waning influence on Hitler, he and the Führer often met to discuss political philosophy and other matters, including personal ones. Eckart was even convinced to join the famous Beer Hall Putsch coup in November 1923 and was put in the same prison as Hitler afterwards. During this time with Hitler, while on the run and in prison, Eckart had begun to believe that Hitler might indeed be the savior that Germany needed. Even if he didn't believe in Hitler's messianic qualities, Eckart was released after a month in prison and suffered a fatal heart attack. Hitler later said that after Eckart, he never had a true personal friend again. We hope you enjoyed our video. Please leave a comment down below about your thoughts and don't forget to like it. Subscribe to the channel as an offering to the gods of the algorithm and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.